Can I have your attention? Yes. Asking for attention is something that we kind of take for granted, but today I want to talk about why that is so important. I apologize. I am a little late for this live. This is my first one here on YouTube. So getting the technology worked out was a little bit more than I knew what to expect. So I'm going to bring up my notes, you guys, so I can be prepared for this conversation. And we're talking about mind wandering. Help. How do I stop my mind from wandering? So sometimes mind wandering can be a good thing. I'm going to take a sip of my water because it can help us be creative. It can kind of help us get lost in thought when we're going through something difficult. But there are times when you don't want your head up in the cloud. You know, it's not a lazy Sunday afternoon. You're not looking for inspiration. You're not enduring something terrible. Taking a sip of water. Give me a second. But mind wandering happens a lot more than we would expect. Some scientific study shows us that 96% of Americans experience mind wandering. And up to as much as 50% of our days are spent with our head kind of off task. And just like I asked for your attention to start off this video, our attention is where our brain is focused, right? It's kind of the boss of our brain. It's the boss of what we're working on. It's what the boss of what we're focusing on. So we want that to be a nice boss, right? We don't want it to lead us down rabbit holes that we don't want to go down. So let's look at the definition of mind wandering. And I'm going to read you here from my notes. Make these like a little bit bigger so they're easier to read. So the definition of mind wandering is you are not guiding your mind to remain on one topic. Your constraints are gone, and the absence of those constraints generates a stream of thought. This comes from the University of Virginia. This is their definition of mind wandering. And if you guys have some comments, questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm just going to say hi to everyone here. Okay, so please feel free to drop them over in the chat. So that's the scientific definition is when we're not trying to be creative, we're trying to focus on something, but we're not in control of where our thoughts are going. So that is the definition of mind wandering I want to focus on for this particular conversation today. Why does it happen? Unintentional mind wandering is caused by the cognitive system. So the part of your brain that suppresses impulses and focuses your attention. And it happens precisely when and because the expected value of whatever you're doing usually is less towards achievement of something that deemed to be low in it's boredom, or your judgment generates a search for a task that is more exciting. So how do we stay focused on something that we might find boring? I talked about in a prior video, I can link to down below, about ADHD, and some of those tools are very valid for this conversation. But this is just for, neurotypical human and how focus works for those individuals. Let me give you a couple of different suggestions, and most of it goes back to the practice of mindfulness. So that's actually like the opposite of mind wandering. Mindfulness is really being present in this particular moment. And so in that video that I did recently about ADHD and why you can't focus, we talked about meditation in detail. And this is also a practice that could help for mind wandering. And the reason is meditation is the practice of just focusing on your breath or a single affirmation, or maybe even like a sound, like if you're listening to a bell or something like that, and bringing your mind back, and bringing your mind back, and bringing your mind back. Your mind is supposed to wander. And it's actually an exercise to continue to bring your mind back again and again and again. And there's something in the world of neuroscience called neuroplasticity. And that's the ability of our brain to kind of shape and adjust. So if you notice that your mind is wandering often, you can actually build that muscle of attention by doing something such as meditation, because you're bringing your mind back to the task that you want to be focusing on again and again and again. Okay, so that is tip number one. Tip number two is pay attention to your attention. And I talk a lot about Pomodoro technique. I can link a blog post down below in the description here to give you a better description of what that is. But basically, it's where you use a timer to have a work period, and then the timer goes off, and then you take a break. So if you're using a Pomodoro technique, you have those little bells that go off usually about every 20, 25 minutes, and you can pay attention to where your brain is. Or if you're working and you notice that your brain is wandering, pay attention to the fact that it's gone off task. Oh my gosh, I've picked up my phone and I've been scrolling Instagram for the last, I don't even know how many minutes. Notice that you're doing it and consciously bring your brain back to whatever you want to be focusing on. So again, that by paying attention to your attention, you are flexing that muscle and building the neuroplasticity in your brain and creating more focus. Thirdly, pay attention to stress. So in times of stress, I shared actually just last weekend, my dog was really, really, really sick. He ended up having to have surgery over the weekend. And I had a really hard time like showing up and getting work done here because my mind was with him over off in the surgery center. It didn't help that my sweet vet, who I'm very, very grateful for, kept sending me updates and pictures. But that's an example. When we're stressed, our brain is trying to work through whatever is stressing us out. And it's even harder to stop that mind wandering. So do what you can to fight the effects of stress, whether it be exercise. There is some scientific data that goes to support like a intermittent fasting diet and how that can also increase focus and reduce stress. And then finally, the tip of taking breaks. So if you go to that Pomodoro technique and you work for, a 20-minute focus session, make sure that when that timer goes off, you're actually getting up and taking that break. That gives your brain the opportunity to just wander wherever it wants. Maybe take a walk and just pay attention to nature. And then when you get back to your work, you should have renewed attention. Don't work so much that you're burning out and your mind is actually wanting to take that breaks, but you're not allowing it to just wander, be free, and regain that attention coming back in. Okay, I hope that gives you guys some tips for focus. Another great way to focus is to make sure that you are setting your priorities each day. And you can do that through the reset routine. It's a very powerful 10-minute routine. I'll link it below if you guys want more info. I will be back here next week. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you soon.